Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about DeltaLake. So why do you care about DeltaLake? Well, DeltaLake's growth has increased 663% in the last 3 years as a storage layer. So it's extremely popular and most Fortune 500 companies are using it. Here are some of the companies that are using it. So what it is a storage layer um, for your data files. So what that means, well, first of all, let's kind of talk through different types of files. So there's different types of files. One of them is a CSV. It's kind of like a spreadsheet. Another is JSON, which is basically like ordered pairs. Oracle has their own type of data file that is optimized, basically similar to a spreadsheet, but it's specific to them. And then there's an open source file type called Parquet, and similar to JSON and CSV, it's accessible from anywhere, as opposed to something like Oracle, where you can't read it from any type of system. So if you wanted to read Oracle, it sometimes is complicated to read it, and to move it around is not necessarily the easiest thing. So Parquet is open source, and you can do that, and that is why DeltaLake chose Parquet as their file format. And Parquet is developed by the Apache Software Foundation. If you know, the Apache Software Foundation is responsible for things like Hadoop and Spark. They provide a framework and a organizational alignment for developing open source software, and they're really at the forefront of the open source movement, I would say. And so Parquet is part of Apache, so that means it is open source. It is agnostic, like I mentioned before. That means that you can read it from anywhere. Anyone can read it, kind of like a CSV file. It's very easy to read, and there are software libraries for Python for basically anything. You can read it from. Then another thing to mention is that it's optimized for large scale, high performance, and it is organized by columns as opposed to rows. So those are some of the characteristics of Parquet. So here are some of the things that you could use to read Parquet files. So Spark, Amazon Athena, Snowflake, Microsoft SQL Server, Trino, these are all processing engines that can be used to read Parquet files. Now, if you want to do things like data streaming or things along the lines of ERP resource, like transactional type of data, where you have multiple sources trying to use the same file at the same time and trying to write at the same time, you would have a lot of trouble using Parquet in its traditional form. Data streaming is similar, so you couldn't really use Parquet in its traditional form. To do that, you need more of a system built around that. So what does that mean? That means that, for example, you need to make sure that you can a write either commits or it fails, and it will roll back to the previous version automatically if a write fails. So this is along the lines of ACID transactions, and that's what they call it. So it's basically making sure that writes either fully succeed or fully fail. And you can append data really easily. Another thing is you want to make sure that you have good version control. So that means that you want to make sure that when you make changes to files, you have good version control. It's very important for transactional type of data and data streaming. So in the non-open format, there's purpose-built systems for this, and they all have their own proprietary file type, which is very difficult to be read outside. It's difficult to be transported outside of the system. You can't use it for things like, or it's very hard to use it for things like machine learning and AI. And these systems are Amazon Aurora, which is Amazon's version of a data warehouse. Snowflake and Oracle are all examples of those. But that is where DeltaLake comes in, and that's why it's so popular, like I mentioned at the beginning. It's why the growth of DeltaLake is staggering over the last 3 years, and so many people are using it. It's because it can provide you with those things that I mentioned earlier. So you can use it for your transactional and your streaming data. So you can run your business on DeltaLake, and just like you would on Oracle, or just like you would on Amazon Aurora. And that's due to the way that it's architected. And the way that it's architected is that each Parquet file, it accompanies a log file. So the log file, it basically points to the Parquet file, and if the Parquet file hasn't fully written, then the log file will point to the previous version of the Parquet file. It stores any kind of changes, so versions, those types of things. That all is handled with the combination of the log file and the Parquet file. It ensures that that transactions either complete or fail. So the Delta log, which is a JSON file, that always gets hit first before the Parquet file, and that is how it is managed. That is how the transactional type of data is managed. So not only that, but if you have a system like this, you can easily share your Parquet files with all of your different systems, even if you're not using directly through DeltaLake. So your Parquet files are easily shareable, as well as through DeltaLake or just through Parquet. So this is why it is extremely popular. Not only that, but you can use Spark with DeltaLake, and that is as your processing engine, which is the most popular processing engine for machine learning and artificial intelligence applications right now. So it's extremely powerful to be able to do that. The most popular way of using DeltaLake is through Databricks. And so what I did was I exported a couple of LinkedIn exports that show a bunch of LinkedIn profiles from a company, but each one only could be up to 1,000 names, and the company is large. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to merge those into a single DeltaLake table. And so what I did was I'm putting them into two separate DeltaLake tables here, and then I'll show you kind of what the profiles look like. So this is in SQL. Everything in Databricks can be done in SQL, which makes it very easy. If you look at the first table that I created, which obviously it's going to create the Parquet file, you can see it has 926 rows. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge lead gen 3, that table, with I'm also going to add in the new table 4, that I created for this. So I'm going to add those together. And so now the new table is going to have 957 additional rows, and you can see that those two were successfully merged together. And so those are in a DeltaLake table, and that is Parquet, which is front-ended by the Delta log file, which is kind of what gives you all of that secret sauce. Now what I'm going to do is, because I want to create a third row that has the email, or what I would guess to be the email, I'm going to eliminate some of these parentheses. So like when people have their maiden name in parentheses, I am going to eliminate that. So that's what I'm doing here. And then what I'm doing here is I'm adding another column that has the guess of the email address. So I added the first name and then the last name at the company. So now I have all of these names with an additional column here. So if you look, what has happened to this, there's an additional column here that has the email if the email address. So that has been added in there. And now I am going to show you kind of the details around it. So this command is describe details. So it shows kind of the different details around the table. So it shows you where it's located. It shows how many files, since we added both of the files together. It's referencing two files. It shows the number of versions, those types of things. So that's a good command to start looking into kind of what's in the log file that wouldn't be in a traditional Parquet file. Now, describe history, that shows all of the different things that we've done. So we've created the table, we've copied the table. So there's a total of 4 versions of this table, and we can roll back to any of these versions. So let's see how we would roll back. We just go lead gen 3 at version 2, and then we can show you that we can also roll back to whatever version you want. But as you can see, lead gen version 2, that is still going to have the different rows, but if you go back to version 1, you can see it has the original data source in it. Lead gen version 2, it isn't going to have the email, but it's going to have them both combined. So you can see kind of what was done on each of these versions. And then we can show, like, there's a couple of commands that are done to optimize this. So like optimize is a specific command if you're making lots of changes in large files. Optimize will optimize like the number of files. So instead of having 2 files, you only have 1 file. It's going to make it much more compact. As you can see, there's number of files removed too. So because it was referencing 2 files at the beginning, now it's down to 1. And then vacuum, that's a very similar command, and it can do things like clean up old versions based on your settings that you have and things along those lines. So The one disadvantage of this, if you can imagine there being tons of different versions and if you make tons of different changes to the data, it could make your data like spiral and have tons of different tons of data, and that's not good. So that's where vacuum and optimize come in. So I hope this kind of helped you show you what you can do and how Delta Lake works, and how both the data log as well as the Parquet file enable you to have the full ACID transactions, as well as the full ability to do those types of things. And the other cool thing is that you can also do your machine learning, your AI workloads on the same data, so you don't have to pipe it anywhere else. You can also access the same data anywhere. So you have these abilities to do your transactional workloads and run your business on this data in a single source, as well as you have the ability to do your machine learning on the workload. So it's on the data on the same spot. So it's really cool.